Storytime, nowhere else to go but up. This is your warning to stop reading here if you don't like gross. I'm a nurse, and I see tons of nasty, gross, scary things. But there was this one guy that came into the emergency room complaining of severe stomach cramps, vomiting, and numbness in his hands. We ran all of the usual tests, but everything came back normal. He seemed pretty healthy, and we couldn't figure out what might be causing all of his symptoms. Then, while going through a sheet of routine questions, I asked him when he last used the bathroom. When he answered, I thought I had definitely misheard him, because there was no way I heard what I thought I heard. I asked him again, and he repeated the same response. 2 months. We immediately sent him down to radiology for x-rays, and when the images came back, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He had the largest blockage in his gut that I had ever seen. The only thing we could do for him was give him medicine to help him use the bathroom and let nature take its course. We sent him home, and I didn't think about him again. That is until he came back a few days later, and he was living an actual nightmare. He was in so much pain he was screaming, and it was almost impossible to talk to him. I asked him if he had taken the medicine we gave him, and he said yes, but he still hadn't used the bathroom. That's when I asked him what he had been eating, and his answer stopped me in my tracks. All he had eaten was pumpkin seeds with the shells. I know that doesn't sound horrifying, but you're about to find out why it is. Right there in the examination room, he began to throw up all over himself and the floor. The vomit was brown and sludgy with white pieces, and the smell made me realize it wasn't just vomit. He hadn't used the bathroom for so long that all the pressure in his gut had nowhere else to go but up. Storytime, I choose not to be. Does anyone else have that one friend that scares the crap out of them? I know the obvious thing is to just not be his friend anymore, but in this case, I don't really have a choice. My mom and his mom have been friends since grade school, so yeah, I'm pretty much stuck. For this post, we'll call him Micah. One day, I was walking with Micah, and it seemed like this entire group we passed was terrified. I knew they weren't afraid of me, so it had to be Micah. Later that day, I saw one of the guys from the group, and I started to make random conversation hoping he would bring up Micah, but before I even said a word, he asked me why I hang out with Micah. I could see all over his face that he was super nervous about something. He kept looking around, and he was almost whispering. I told him about our moms being friends, and his response shook me to my core. He looked around one more time, leaned in towards me, and told me to never ever go into the woods with Micah. I tried to ask him what he meant, but before I could, all the color drained from his face, and I turned around to see Micah. I had never been afraid of Micah before, but suddenly, I felt like maybe I should be. A couple days later, I went over to Micah's house, and I couldn't help acting weird. I realized I was terrified of him, and I couldn't hide it. I guess he could tell because he flat out said I was being weird. Then he asked me the one question I never wanted to hear. Do you want to go for a walk in the woods? I got so nervous I thought I might vomit, but instead I stupidly agreed. We started walking through the woods behind his house when he turned to me and asked me what the guy from school said. I'm not sure why, but it's almost like I knew I had to lie. I tried to make it seem like we didn't talk about him at all, but I swear he knew I was lying. Then he said something that made me go numb all over. With a flat, serious tone, he looked me right in the eye and said, "Don't ever forget that I'm smart enough to be a killer. I choose not to be." Storytime, it wasn't normal. I really need help with everything that's going on right now, because I feel like I might be losing it. I saw something on my doorbell camera that is literally haunting me, but I can't make sense of it. I live in a pretty normal neighborhood with houses that are close together, and almost everyone has cameras. My dad just installed another camera over our garage lights, and pretty much no one knows it's there. One night at like 3 a.m. I woke up because I thought I heard someone scream. It wasn't a full-on help me scream, but it was more of an "oh, that scared me" scream. I realized my phone was showing a live view from the camera over the garage. I was still half asleep, but what I saw on the screen immediately jolted me awake. I could hear what sounded like someone's screams being muffled, and it looked like shadows off to the side were struggling or fighting, but all I could see were the shadows. I couldn't actually see people. I watched in horror as one shadow dragged the other further up to the house. I wasn't sure what I had just seen, but I also didn't know what to do, so I just laid there until I fell asleep. In the morning, I thought maybe I dreamt the whole thing, and I was just about to let it go when the doorbell rang. And guess who it was? My neighbor. He stood there and tried to casually ask me if I had trouble with my doorbell camera. I checked the camera, and covering the lens was a piece of tape. My neighbor seemed relieved, but as I pointed to the garage camera, all of the color drained from his face. As the days went on, I noticed I hadn't seen his wife all week. I knew I wasn't going crazy, and I knew something bad happened to someone in that house. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I went to his house yesterday and confronted him about the whole thing. He treated me like I was crazy and said his wife was on vacation and would be back soon. I told him if she didn't come back by the end of the week I was calling the cops. Well, today his wife showed up, but now there's a local girl in the paper because she's missing. Do you think it could have been my neighbor? I don't know what to do because I'm not really sure what I saw that night. I just know it wasn't normal. Storytime, I thought they were pimples. A couple of years ago, I was a freshman in college, and I wanted to join the fraternity on campus. It was a smaller campus, and the fraternity isn't even recognized, so I can't believe I went through everything I went through. I'm sure you've heard of pledging, and all the horror stories, but this one is terrifying. If we wanted to join the fraternity, we had to do a bunch of random things. For example, if we saw one of our brothers out on campus, we would have to go up to them, get down on one knee, and ask them how we could make their day better. If your brother said hop on one foot and bark like a dog in the middle of the quad, you had to do it. Fast forward a month into pledging, and it's the night before becoming a part of the fraternity. They said we were all pigs, and therefore we had to spend the entire night in the mud. No, we were not fully clothed. I didn't think it would be that bad besides maybe being cold, but I couldn't have been more wrong. To this day it is the worst thing I've been through in my life. Me and 6 other guys walked into this huge puddle of mud, and the more we walked the worse it smelled. I thought I was going to be sick, but the thought of laying in a mixture of my own vomit and mud stopped me. First we had to completely cover ourselves in the mud, yes, even our faces, and then lay there until morning. I would have been okay laying there, but the smell coming from the mud was unbearable. I kept thinking it had to be mixed with something else, and I found out I was right. After it sent me to the hospital, after about 3 hours I gave up, went back to my room, and showered. I thought that was the end of it, but 2 days later, I woke up with all these pimples around my mouth. I did what anyone would do, and I popped them. Like normal they oozed pus, and I went to my classes. I expected them to get better, but after about a week I was in so much pain I couldn't talk or eat. I went to the emergency room, and I was just waiting for my x-rays to be examined when suddenly I heard one of the doctors say, "Oh no." I could tell by the doctor's face something was wrong, but what he said caught me completely off guard. The mud we had to lay in must have had something decaying in it, because what was growing around my lips were maggots. The doctor squeezed 6 of them out of my face, and I had to take medicine for months. Whenever I think about it, I can't believe I thought they were pimples. Story time, it's just dirty water. If you get grossed out easy, now is your chance to keep scrolling. This happened to me when I was in middle school, and I still have nightmares about it. My room used to be on the top floor, and above me was the attic. It wasn't finished, but you could walk around up there, and my family used it for storage. One day I woke up, and my bed was soaking wet. Not only was it wet, but it smelled absolutely awful, almost like pee that was just sitting there. It was the most disgusting thing I ever smelled. My hair was wet, my face was wet, and my clothes were soaked. I could see marks on my ceiling, so I figured it was just a leak, and the smell was from sitting water or something. At the time I was 12, so what did I know? I told my dad. He thought the same thing, so we just cleaned it up, and I slept in my bed that same night. That one simple decision put me in the hospital. I was woken up in the middle of the night to something hitting me, and the most unbearable smell I've ever experienced. I was covered in something hard, and again I was soaked. It was dark in my room, so I had no idea what was going on. I tried to feel around, and stuck my finger right into what felt like a mouth. I almost screamed, but I don't think my brain wanted to believe it, so I felt around some more. Sure enough, I was touching a wet, soggy face with an open mouth. I screamed for my dad, and when he turned the light on, I couldn't believe what was staring back at me.